Turbo is a pop album. Judas Priest were sellouts because of it. What are you talking about? Judas Priest were way ahead of their time. It is a masterpiece.
I think it was just simply okay.
What? Get out of here. Don't. This album has been dividing Judas Priest fans for over 35 years now. Released on the 14th of April in 1986, Turbo became the 10th studio album by the legendary British heavy metal band Judas Priest. And so, just as we do with every Judas Priest album in the Defenders of the Faith series, let's take a look at some of the lesser known facts about probably one of the most controversial Judas Priest albums ever written. Here you go. A quick note before we start though, and especially for those who are new to the series. This video is made to start a conversation, and please therefore do not hesitate to comment with anything you hear or see in it, anything you agree or disagree about. And of course, I personally would love to see you back on the channel for more exclusive heavy metal videos, and therefore please do not forget to subscribe to the Metal Pilgrim channel for more exclusive rock and metal content. Alright, let's do it. 1986 marked 10 years since Judas Priest have been signed to CBS Records, and the next studio album was supposed to be the 10th in the Judas Priest discography.
Alright, here's an opportunity to be creative.
And so the band thought that they should do something explosive to celebrate the anniversaries. And well, we all know they did. The original intention by Judas Priest was to release a double album, described as a journey through the history of metal. Its first part was supposed to be comprised of more commercial sounding hard rock songs. And the second part of the classic aggressive Judas Priest metal material. And so it would be a perfect follow-up to the two previous albums, Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith, which both went platinum in no time. Yet the first thing the band found out when they got to the Bahamas where they recorded Turbo was that CBS declined their offer and insisted on a standard release. And the reason for that was quite simple. Judas Priest's intention was to sell the double album at a single album price. The band was not going to charge CBS more for those extra songs, yet the label still did not go for it, because they calculated that the duality of the album would not have any impact on its sales, especially when it comes to a band like Judas Priest, yet the production costs of such an album would be twice as high. Thus, this is how the band said goodbye to the Twin Turbos idea and said hello to Turbo. Overall, Judas Priest wrote 19 songs for this album, only 9 of which made it on Turbo. 4 more created a backbone for the band's next studio album, Ram It Down, including its title track, of course, Hard as Iron, Love You to Death, and Monsters of Rock. By the way, the Ram It Down episode will be released on the channel in just over a week, so make sure you hit that bell button to not miss it. I'm also thinking of doing a little vinyl giveaway for that episode, because it's gonna be awfully close to my birthday, so please do let me know what you think about it in the comments. 3 more songs, Red, White and Blue, Prisoner of Your Eyes, and All Fired Up, the world has heard on the remastered series. Turn On Your Light appeared on the Defenders of the Faith reissue. And yet there are 2 more songs, Under the Gun and Fighting for Your Love, which we have never heard before. Who knows, maybe one day we will, or not. Hope to invite Rob Halford or one of the other guys on the channel to speak a little bit about it and shine some light on what's going on with those tracks. Turbo is known for its usage of guitar synthesizers. And you don't even have to be a Judas Priest expert to know that. It becomes kinda obvious from the opening notes of the first single released to this album. You see? Don't get me wrong, Judas Priest wasn't the first band to embrace the new technology, yet they were the first ones to blend it into the production of a heavy metal album. In fact, Turbo, in addition to the above mentioned facts, is the very first heavy metal album which was completely and fully digitally recorded. Nowadays, it's a standard. Coming back to the synths though, the band knew that the die-hard heavy metal maniacs would not take the decision lightly. But in his latest book, Confess, Rob Halford actually remembers that while weighing all the pros and cons of the decision, the band thought to themselves that they are a quintessential heavy metal band, and therefore everything they do will be metal, and they should not lock themselves within some boundaries. Rob and pretty much all the other guys by that time had, plenty of those already.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And we can all pretend that we hate those synth sounds as much as we want, until the intro to Turbo Lover kicks in at a concert.
We got the title track from the Turbo album. This is Turbo Lover!
Yet the truth is that with the blend of those sounds with the heavy metal, the band once again was way ahead of its time. Whether it's for worst or best really depends on your tastes, yet it might be Turbo's sound that echoed 20 years later and laid the foundations for pretty much all modern power metal bands who are using those sounds pretty heavily these days. And just like Rob Halford in 1998, I have a coming out to do. I love the title track for this album, and I love it not despite the usage of the synth, but actually because of them.
What?
I don't know, what do you personally think of the album's sound? Do you love it, or is it at the very bottom of the list of Judas Priest albums for you personally? Do let us know in the comments. Let's start a conversation and see what Judas Priest fans think about Turbo. A year before Turbo's released, 1985, was a rather weird year for Judas Priest, and it definitely had its effect on both the sound of this album and the band overall.
Basically, I've been captured by these crazed, insane, metal maniac women.
It was the very first year in Judas Priest's existence when the band did not go on tour at all. The only gig they played was at the legendary Live Aid, for which they flew straight from the Bahamas. And it is at this show that the course of Judas Priest history has changed forever. For a brief period of time before that concert during the same year, Rob Halford had to stay sober to treat his hepatitis. Yet as soon as he was done with it, he laid heavy on substance abuse once again. In addition to meeting a lot of his personal idols, including of course Joan Baez, whose song Diamonds and Rust they covered rather successfully, Rob Halford met a guy named Brian during an after party for Live Aid musicians who became his boyfriend. In Confess, Rob remembers that the two had a rather violent sexual relationship. In addition, this relationship only enhanced Rob's addiction to drugs, which was developing rather quickly at that time. And so, after one violent fight and leaving the premises, Rob Halford actually remembers that he saw that Brian had a gun. Half an hour later, he found out that his boyfriend committed suicide. Of course, this event was one of the key factors for why Rob Halford decided to go completely sober and went on rehab in 1986. Coming back to the band stronger than ever and given some of his best live performances during the consecutive Fuel for Life tour. Speaking about that tour, by the way, Judas Priest took the bands Dokken and Bon Jovi as supporting acts for Fuel for Life tour, and one rather interesting incident happened during that tour. Did you ever notice how on almost all pictures we can see from 1986 and 1987, especially KK Downing is almost always photographed in shades? Well, in his latest book, Days and Nights in Judas Priest, KK Downing actually tells us the story of how that happened. A couple of minutes before one of the shows, KK Downing realized that one of his guitars, Mini V, had to be restringed, and so he asked his guitar engineer to restring it rather quickly, and he did. Yet, he did not have enough time to simply cut the strings. I mean, that's not too much of a deal. A lot of guitar players do not cut those. I do. I can understand when they're not cut. But during the show, Rob Halford accidentally bumped into KK, and so his left arm went upwards and his string poked his eye. There was a lot of blood, and KK remembers not seeing almost anything, and so in order to finish the show, he actually had to wear the shades. Afterwards, everyone realized how cool they looked, and so they decided to wear them almost all the time. Oh, and by the way, it is during the Fuel for Life tour that the legendary movie Heavy Metal Parking Lot has been shot. By the way, should I do a special episode on this movie and its relation to Judas Priest? Let me know in the comments. The songs Reckless and Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days were the very first Judas Priest songs to be played in a tuning lower than E. But I guess it kind of disproves the point that in order to sound heavy, you have to tune down. And every time you tune down, you sound heavier.
What? What the fuck?
Because both of those songs are definitely not the heaviest in the Judas Priest discography. They might not even be the heaviest on Turbo. And while we're speaking about the song Reckless, yes, it is true, the band was actually asked to submit it as a soundtrack for the movie Top Gun with Tom Cruise.
We're gonna have a good time. Always.
Yet they decided to not do that because of two reasons. Number one, they did not actually believe in the success of this movie, and at that time Judas Priest did not want to associate themselves with anything unsuccessful. And number two is that the contract would imply that they could not place it on Turbo. After a not so long discussion, the band decided to not go through with the deal because they thought that on Turbo it would have a much higher success than as a soundtrack to Top Gun. It did not. It didn't even land a chart. The Turbo album artwork is the third and final Judas Priest album artwork, which was designed by Doug Johnson, and thus completing the futuristic trio of Screaming for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith, and Turbo. I don't have a third arm, so I'll just point at it, okay? In fact, it was actually the very last commercial album artwork by Doug Johnson. After that, he went to pursue his passion in theater. By the way, did you ever notice that the logo on the Turbo album artwork is the only 3D type logo which does not have any shades in it? Many years it has been believed that the legendary Julio Iglesias has been featured on Turbo. And for all those youngsters who are now rolling their eyebrows, yes, he is the father of Enrique Iglesias. And that means only one thing, that it is time for our Mythbusters bit. Yes, it is true. Julio Iglesias was in fact present at the Compass Point Studios at the same time while Judas Priest were there. And yes, it is true that Julio Iglesias in one interview before the Turbo's release said that they will record a song and call it Electric Bolero. What is also true is that it was a joke. The song which Julio referred to was the song Prisoner of Your Eyes, which was released with a remastered series. And I think that it's pretty obvious that there is no Julio Iglesias' voice there. In reality, the story went like this. Julio Iglesias was present at the studio while the band was recording Prisoner of Your Eyes, and he actually said to the management that this song is amazing, he absolutely loves it, and he thinks that his voice would sound amazing together with Rob's on this track. That's it. It went nowhere. So yeah, if you are a fan of both Judas Priest and Julio Iglesias, I have to disappoint you. Sorry. Despite quite divided opinions about the album, Turbo was actually the most commercially successful Judas Priest album up until Angel of Retribution. You may like Turbo or not, but one thing that absolutely everyone who is somewhat tied to the music industry would agree on is that Tom Allom, the band's producer, was an absolute genius on this one. You see, it would be extremely hard for any band to score 3 platinum albums in a row with the same musical style. And since Judas Priest already released Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith, both of which went platinum, it was extremely important for the band's management to invite new audiences to the Judas Priest family on this one. And they did.
But we knew that there were always people on the outer fringes, you know, looking in and saying, well, I like Priest, but maybe, you know, I'm not sure about this or I'm not sure about that. And I think to reach out and bring those people in, we had to not exactly sort of completely cater for their taste, but we adapted somewhat, you know.
You see, die-hard heavy metal and especially Judas Priest fans would have purchased any album by the band. I mean, I know I will definitely purchase the next one the moment I find out that they are about to release it.
Do you know something?
Do you know something?
I might know something.
I might know something too.
And so the management's task is always to attract new audiences to the band's fan base. And that's exactly what they did with the love and romance lyrics and a slightly sweeter sound. KK Downing actually remembers that after the release of this album, and especially during the consecutive Fuel for Life tour, he has signed more boobs than possibly he has seen in his life before that. One young and a very attractive girl actually brought her 2 babies for the band to sign them. Judas Priest of course declined the offer, but still, what a hack. And so now it is clear that despite quite mixed response to Turbo, the album was able to land at number 33 in the United Kingdom and number 17 on Billboard 200 in the United States, certified as platinum only 2 months after its release. By the way, in order to promote Turbo, the band released several promo videos, which I'm not going to comment, but here's one of them.
Do you know me, lead singer of Judas Priest, idol of millions? Wherever I go, in case folks don't know me, I always make sure I carry my turbo.
Judas Priest's new album, Turbo. Don't wreck home without it.
Love it. The song Parental Guidance was written as a response to Tipper Gore's organization Parents Music Resource Center and its attack on Judas Priest and several other bands as well for their song Eat Me Alive. I promise to cover that incident when we speak about Defenders of the Faith, which is going to be very, very soon. One thing I wanted to point out though, it is this organization which is responsible for those little black stickers on the albums, you know, saying parental advisory, which are supposed to keep the kids away from such albums. Yet worked as a magnet for those, driving the sales for the albums with such stickers among the kids way up. The band even said hello to Tipper Gore and her organization in one of the commercial videos for Turbo.
It's 1986. Do you know where your children are? They're out burning on turbo power.
Judas Priest Turbo. Fuel for Life.
I love them, honestly. How amazing is that? Yes, it is true. Turbo is definitely one of the most controversial Judas Priest albums. I think the only one which can compare to it is Nostradamus, which we are going to speak about later. And I'll be honest with you, it does not make it to my personal top of the Judas Priest albums. But it is not because of the synths, it is not because of the sound. I just simply think that songwriting on some of the other albums, including some of the underrated ones, like Point of Entry, is a bit higher than the one on Turbo. And still, despite anything, I consider this album to be extremely strong. That's how high the bar is set for Judas Priest for me personally. I mean, if I would compare it to the majority of the heavy metal albums which were released during that time, those ones wouldn't even stand a chance. But what do you personally think about Turbo, and which song do you consider the strongest one from this album and why? As always, please do let us know in the comments. I'm very curious to find out which song do Judas Priest fans consider to be the strongest one from this album and why.
Write that down, write that down!
And while you're down there in the comment section, please comment with what you personally think of Turbo's influence on modern power metal bands, which we spoke about earlier in this episode. Is it true or is it a little bit of a speculation? And what do you personally think about those modern metal bands? As always, thank you so much for watching, guys, especially if you made it all the way here to the end of this video. I'll be extremely thankful if you would like and share this video to spread the word about it and help me with the YouTube algorithms, of course, but most importantly, please do not forget to subscribe to the Metal Pilgrim channel on YouTube. I promise there is a lot of really cool Judas Priest and not only material coming up on the channel very soon. Keep rocking!